The siren began to wail before dessert hit the table, a piercing, mechanical cry that sliced through the calm Virginia night, through laughter and small talk, through every illusion of safety I'd ever held. 5 minutes earlier, I'd been sitting at my parents' dining table in base housing at Quantico, pushing peas across my plate while pretending to listen to my uncle's story about retirement paperwork. It was an ordinary evening, or at least it seemed that way. My mother, Colonel Rebecca Lawson, looked completely at ease. Her uniform jacket hung over a chair, her sleeves rolled up, her hair pinned back in that no-nonsense Marine style I'd grown up watching. But then she did something she had never done in all my 30 years. She slipped me a folded note under the table that I stared at it like it might explode. Her handwriting was sharp, deliberate. Pretend you're not feeling well. Leave now. I looked up, confused, but her eyes were calm, commanding. A faint nod, that Marine signal that meant follow the order, not the emotion. My chest tightened. I rose slowly, muttered something about a headache, and excused myself. Jacob, my brother, snorted. Already tired, Lieutenant, he teased. But Mom's gaze never wavered. Outside, the humid air pressed against my skin. The quiet hum of the bass seemed undisturbed. I barely made it to the sidewalk when the first siren blared across the night. I froze. That sound wasn't a drill. One long tone, lockdown. Floodlights snapped on, cutting through the darkness as MPs raced past in armored trucks. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom, stay outside. Do not come back in. Trust me, trust her. I always had. Through deployments, through nights she'd sit silently reading casualty reports. When she said trust me, it wasn't advice, it was survival. Minutes later, paramedics rushed into our house. The laughter that had filled it was replaced by radio chatter and shouts. I caught a glimpse through the open door, chairs overturned, my father's voice yelling, then silence. My mother emerged at last, pale but composed. Only then did she let her shoulders fall the tiniest bit. Later, I'd learn what she had seen, the faint chemical smell from the casserole, the tension in our guests' hands, the subtle tells that only a Marine trained for decades could recognize. But that night, standing under the red and blue glow of Quantico's emergency lights, I realized something profound. My mother's instincts weren't just habits of service. They were shields, and they had just saved my life. The sirens stopped just before dawn. By then, the neighborhood was sealed off, patrol lights still flashing against the low clouds. I hadn't slept. I just sat there on the curb outside our house, wrapped in one of my mother's old blankets, watching the slow unraveling of what had once been our ordinary life. At first, the night had been chaos, officers running in and out, people whispering, lights cutting through windows. But when the last truck left and the engines faded, the silence felt almost cruel. My mother stood by the porch steps, still wearing her duty shirt from dinner, now stained with someone else's blood. Her face was unreadable, not fear, not shock, just an iron calm that somehow made it worse. Mom, I whispered, what happened? She didn't look at me when she answered. They tried to kill your father. My stomach turned. Who? Not now, she said, her voice firm but low. There's a process. Let them finish their work first. I had heard that tone all my life, the tone of a commanding officer, not a mother. But I obeyed it anyway. By morning, the agents from the NCIS were everywhere. They spoke in clipped sentences, their faces tired and guarded. I learned fragments through overheard conversations, words like sabotage, insider, and targeted attack. My father, a logistics specialist for Marine intelligence, was still unconscious in the hospital. A small amount of nerve toxin had been detected in his bloodstream. Someone had laced the food, and my mother had noticed it first. While everyone else laughed and talked, she had seen the sweat bead on our guest's temple, the faint tremor in his fingers as he lifted his fork. That was when she slipped me the note, a silent order to leave. If I had stayed even 10 more minutes, I might have been one of the bodies they carried out. The agents questioned her for hours. I watched from the hallway, listening to the rhythm of her answers, calm, clipped, professional. She wasn't the colonel tonight, she was a mother guarding her family. When the house finally emptied, the sun was high. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the half-eaten dinner plates still left behind. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for a photo on the counter, the last family picture we'd taken, smiling in front of this same house. "Mom," I said softly, "how did you know?" She looked up, eyes weary but sharp. "Because I've seen it before. In Kandahar. In Mosul. Evil doesn't always wear a uniform, Emily. Sometimes, it wears a friendly smile and brings a dish to dinner." Her words cut deeper than she knew. I wanted to ask if she was afraid, if she regretted staying in this life of secrets and watchfulness. But instead, she stood, poured herself black coffee, and began cleaning the kitchen as if nothing had happened. That I followed her movements, precise, deliberate, methodical. It was how she processed pain, by taking control of the chaos around her. When she finally sat down again, she looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since childhood, a rare softness behind the soldier's mask. "Emily," she said quietly, "one day you'll understand. We don't get to choose the wars we fight. Sometimes they follow us home." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The air felt thick with the truth she wasn't saying, that this wasn't over, that whoever had done this wasn't finished. Outside, the morning light stretched across the base, calm and golden, as if trying to pretend nothing had happened. But inside that house, nothing was the same. That was the morning I stopped seeing my mother as just a Marine. That was the morning I realized she had always been something more than a protector. A watcher. A woman who learned long ago that peace was never permanent. The days that followed blurred together, long interviews, security clearances, and the constant hum of quiet suspicion. The investigators came and went like shifting shadows, each one asking the same questions in slightly different ways. But what bothered me wasn't what they asked, it was what they didn't. They treated my mother with an odd kind of reverence, a mixture of fear and respect that told me she wasn't just another officer on base. Every time she entered a room, conversations stopped. Eyes followed her. Even the NCIS commander spoke to her carefully, like a man trying not to provoke a sleeping weapon. By the third day, I started noticing things. A locked drawer in her study that hadn't been there before. A coded notebook she always kept near her laptop. And the way she'd disappear outside at night, phone pressed to her ear, pacing the porch with that same controlled intensity one remembered from her deployment calls. That I told myself it was just procedure, just mom being mom. But part of me knew better. One night, I woke to find her sitting alone in the living room, still in uniform. The only light came from the lamp beside her and the flicker of the TV that wasn't really on, just static. Her coffee had gone cold, untouched, couldn't sleep. I asked quietly. She didn't look at me. "Sleep's a luxury," she said, her tone flat. "One I stopped affording a long time ago." I hesitated. "They're saying it wasn't just an attack, Mom. They're saying it was internal. Someone with clearance." Her jaw tightened. "Don't believe everything you hear. Then tell me what to believe." She looked up at me then, and for the first time, I saw something behind her eyes that frightened me, guilt. Not weakness, not grief. "Guilt, Emily," she said carefully, "sometimes knowing the truth is worse than living with the lie." She stood, grabbed her jacket, and stepped out into the cold night before I could answer. I watched her silhouette disappear into the dark, the front door swinging shut behind her like a whisper. The next morning, I followed her. She drove off base, past the checkpoint, into the wooded roads outside Quantico. The mist was thick, the kind that turns the world ghostly and half-real. After 20 minutes, she pulled into an old cemetery, one I'd never seen.